The workforce. Men and women earning money to support their families with the necessities of life. Millions of American men and women go to work every day. Sometimes the office is like a second home. Unfortunately, that second home can become unbearable, unpleasant, and stressful, not because of the job, but because of the actions of coworkers.
We could meet at the hotel lounge and have a couple drinks and maybe a little dinner.
And this is much more than just a professional relationship.
Well, you know, I'd be glad to help you if I could. Maybe you'd like to stay late a couple of evenings a week and let me tutor you.
Little jokes, innuendos, or even something like a pat on the behind may seem harmless or even funny to some people, but to others these acts are not funny or harmless. These acts can be classified as sexual harassment, and that is illegal. Sexual harassment is a form of sex discrimination and has been defined as offensive, unsolicited, and unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature that another person finds objectionable. Think about that phrase, that another person finds objectionable. In other words, sexual harassment is defined from the victim's point of view, not the harasser's. Even a single act can be considered sexual harassment. It does not have to be an everyday or every month event. If you are offended just once, you may have cause for concern. It can be an overt act, like a kiss. It can be jokes or innuendos about you, your body, your gender, or your dress. It can be a violent attack. It could be a demand for sexual favors in exchange for advancement in your job or schoolwork. Sometimes it is difficult to know when the line has been crossed and what actions constitute sexual harassment. What should you do if you feel that you are a victim of sexual harassment? What can you legally do? What can you do to make the actions stop? Many workers have quit their jobs just to escape the strain associated with sexual harassment. But there are other alternatives, and some of them do involve legal action. But first, an understanding of the subject is vital. Men and women can both be offenders. Harassment of men by men or women by women is also considered sexual discrimination. Sexual harassment isn't about physical attraction or emotional need. It is about power and control and how that power is exercised in the workplace, at school, hospitals, factories, military organizations, all levels of government, anywhere. Sexual harassment can affect you, someone you know, or someone who works for you. It crosses the lines of race, class, education, occupation, and learning or earning power. Sexual harassment may have been one office's dirty little secret until October 1991. That's when the country began discussing the issue as the Senate Judiciary Committee discussed allegations that a law professor made against a Supreme Court nominee. The televised hearings of Anita Hill's claims against Clarence Thomas stirred controversy and started conversations at water coolers across the nation. That same year, more than 24 naval women accused pilots of assaulting them at an annual tailhook convention. The women claimed both active duty and retired naval aviators attacked them in the corridor of a Las Vegas hotel. Other allegations of sexual harassment have made headlines. Senator Brock Adams dropped his re-election bid in 1992 after claims of misconduct. And Senator Bob Packwood of Oregon had to deal publicly with accusations of making unwanted sexual advances toward women employees.
Well, in my experience, is that the entire national consciousness, frankly, was raised by the famous Senate confirmation hearings involving Justice Thomas and Anita Hill, Professor Anita Hill, a law professor, in which, of course, she charged him with certain things, and that was debated on television across the country. That seems to heighten people's awareness that there is a mechanism to redress these kinds of things, that this is not something that you simply have to put up with as another day at the office. Perhaps that was the view of primarily women for many years past. And that has caused, I believe, many more claims to be filed.
Anyone can be a victim of sexual harassment, women and men. However, mostly women report being a target. Surveys indicate almost every American woman has experienced sexual harassment, from 50 to nearly 90%. Less than 10% of the reported cases of sexual harassment involve men as victims. However, the problem does exist and is growing. More men are speaking out about unwelcome advances made toward them. The aggressor is almost always someone who has authority over his or her target.
There are some kind of common characteristics that tend to relate to whether a person is more apt to have a very strong response to the harassment when it occurs or not. So individuals who have had low self-esteem to start with, for example, will take to heart some of what happens much more easily than someone who feels pretty confident and assured about themselves. Someone who is going through some difficulties in their life, maybe fairly strong in their self-esteem and their ego strength and feel pretty good about themselves, but maybe going through some particular difficulty at that point in time, extra stress in their life and so on, may be more vulnerable.
Sexual harassment depends upon what the victim perceives as offensive and not the other person's intent. Sometimes those accused of harassment aren't even aware that their actions can be offensive.
I was the most shocked man on earth when I received the letter from Affirmative Action telling me that I had had a complaint. You could have picked me off the floor. The first thing that goes through your mind is who, what, when, where, how. Was I sleepwalking through this? What in the world is this all about? This has to be a mistake, was the first thing that went through my mind. I had no clue, and even now, after having gone through as much of the ordeal as I have, I still honestly can say I have no clue as to what I supposedly did that someone else construed as sexual harassment, and very few people collaborated their stories. There were more people that came forward and said this did not happen.
Sexual harassment legally falls into two categories. One is defined as behavior that makes the work or school environment unbearable for the victim. The other form of sexual harassment is legally referred to as quid pro quo. It is a type of sexual blackmail. You are told you will get better job opportunities or, in the case of school, better grades if you respond to sexual advances or grant sexual favors.
Not a very good grade on that test, Aaron. What happened?
I don't know. Maybe I just didn't study right.
Well, maybe you need some help with your studies.
Well, you know, actually, the guys were talking about getting together at the dorm next week and studying for the next test, so I might just do that.
I think studying with the guys is fine, but, you know, I'd be happy to do anything I could to help you.
Well, I think I'll probably just study with them if it's okay, you know.
Well, I thought maybe you could come over to my place and I could fix us some dinner and then we could study.
Well, you know, I've got a girlfriend, and I doubt, you know, she'd like that very much, so.
Aaron, I think it's very sweet that you have a girlfriend, but she really has nothing to do with this. She's not going to be giving you your grade at the end of the semester.
Wait a second. Are you saying that if I don't come over to your house and have dinner with you and stay, that I'm not going to pass your class?
I've tried to be friends with you all semester. I think it's time you were friendly with me.
All right, fine.
Good answer. You won't regret this.
Quid pro quo kind of old boy thing where, you know, you either sleep with me or find another place to work. The word is getting out that we simply can't operate that way any longer. But the grayer areas, if you want to call them that, the jokes, the appreciative glances to the secretary as she walks down the hallway, those are the kinds of things where attitudes are changing, particularly among younger women, and we're beginning to see a lot more litigation in that kind of an environment, and a lot of it has to do with the ages and attitudes of the participants. You have older male bosses and younger women, and we're also seeing, of course, more women in managerial positions within organizations, and that's a dynamic that is being seen, where you've got colleagues where this is going on. People at the same level of the corporate ladder, but one man and one woman. And those kinds of educated, mobile, professional women are litigating these claims.
When I went to see the attorney, he had represented me and was going back to represent me in another situation. And after the first situation was resolved, I went back to see him to get the second situation taken care of. And he wanted sexual favors to go and do this, take care of this second situation for me. And when I refused, he told me I need another attorney, that he could no longer help me.
With the second type of harassment, the hostile work environment, you may think your every move is monitored, that you are being mentally undressed, made the target of unwanted sexual jokes or comments, or forced into a situation where you are alone with the harasser and you feel very uncomfortable.
My first year into employment there, a guy joined the staff, and when he first joined, he would make comments to me daily, usually complimentary, to the effect of how I was dressed or my appearance or how my hair was or something that day. And I was uncomfortable with those, but you know, those situations, you just kind of take them sometimes. And we went along like that for about a year. And one day I was leaving from work and I was walking across the parking lot to go to my car, and he came to the door and he called for me, and I stopped. I thought he had a question about work, and I stopped and I waited, and he walked across the parking lot toward me. Well, he came up and he made some suggestive comments to me. And I was in the parking lot alone, and it was a real uncomfortable situation for me. And I felt like I really didn't want to confront him with it there, being alone. So I just chose to get in the car. That's how I dealt with it. And I got in the car and locked the door and started the car up and watched in my rearview mirror, and he walked to his car. So I sat there and waited to see what he was going to do. And he left. So as soon as he left, I turned my car off and I got out and went back in the building and reported it to my supervisor.
This type of sexual harassment is often the more debated of the two types, in part because it does not offer any clear lines over which an aggressor steps. This sexually suggestive environment becomes so offensive and so unbearable that it's transformed into a hostile environment.
Well, you're in early today. Wonder what that says about your weekend. Oh, but you're wearing that terrific perfume again. Well, I tell you, my last assistant wore something you could smell halfway across the parking lot, but this is terrific.
I did some research on that report you'll be presenting at the conference next week. I thought you might like to review it.
Boy, you are the best. You know, all the other girls, women who worked for me before, I mean, they were out here like a shot on Fridays, but you really put in the overtime, don't you? Of course, I guess with that boyfriend of yours out of the picture for good.
My personal life is my own business, Larry.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to pry, but, you know, this place is like a small town. You know, word gets around. I admire the way you're dealing with it. You know, working your butt off every day instead of sitting around feeling sorry for yourself. But, well, you know what they say about all work and no play. How about you and me go out to that new restaurant by the lake Friday?
I've told you before how I feel about going out with somebody I work for.
At least, let me take you out for a drink at the national conference next week.
Nobody told me I was going to the New York meeting.
Well, I've been so busy with the Smithfield account and everything, it probably just slipped my mind. I'll fill you in on all the details later this afternoon. Why don't you book the small conference room, will you?
Why? I thought we were finished with the final report.
Yeah, Ted wants us to make a couple of changes before the national convention. It might take a couple of hours. We'll have to order dinner from that restaurant downstairs. I can't think of a nicer way to put in overtime. Can you?
Well, I think it starts in a very gray area, and as the scenario or vignette moves forward, we clearly see it moving into an area where Larry should have known that what he was doing was unwelcome. Kathleen made it clear to him. She told him expressly. She certainly sent body signals, which he should have been reading, and he persisted. Took it far beyond anything that would have been a misunderstanding and into a realm where he was clearly placing pressure on her to have a social dating relationship with him that she clearly was not interested in having.
Targets of sexual harassment can and do suffer. Many feel embarrassed, intimidated and powerless, betrayed by someone they once had trusted. They're afraid, too, of not being believed, of losing their jobs, even of retaliation by the harasser. Some females even accept it as the price they pay for working in a male-dominated workplace. Almost everyone who is a victim of sexual harassment will keep quiet about it.
I had let it drop. I didn't know what else to do. If I'd have filed a suit, I was an unhappy client. Who was going to believe me?
Usually you're talking about a situation where the harasser has some power, authority, or control over the individual, and the fear is of losing a job, or if it's a graduate student or an undergraduate not graduating, not getting the recommendation either for another job when they go to move on, etc. So that power issue really holds people back from being able to report it.
Although victims may be afraid to come forward, the harassment probably won't end unless they speak up. Confide in a coworker and try to find out whether or not the aggressor is harassing others. Also, report it to someone or confront the aggressor. Otherwise, the harasser may continue to pursue his or her victim for long periods. Communication is important because a harasser and a victim view the same incident differently.
Kathleen, what about trying the new Japanese restaurant for lunch today? Fran said the food is terrific.
Would you mind going someplace else instead?
What's wrong? Afraid of bumping into someone from work?
To be honest, yes. There's something going on, and it really bothers me. It's been going on since the first week I started working for Larry. It's the way he looks at me, always commenting on the way I look, my perfume, my hair, what a great body I have. But today, when I stood up from my chair and he rubbed up against me, I didn't know what to do. When he first asked me out, I told him I was seeing someone. Even then, he kept trying. But after a while, he stopped, and I thought it was over, until he started calling me at home a couple of times. Always with questions about a project we were working on, but every time he found a way to say something about my personal life, or his. In the office, I get this feeling that he's undressing me with his eyes, that he's trying to find a way to be alone with me. Like today, saying we have to work late to revise that report. He always manipulates me into situations like that, when he knows that I could have taken care of it during the day on my own. Sometimes he stops bothering me for a week or two and I think, great, it is finally over. But then he starts it all over again. So I never know what to expect when I come to work in the morning.
Hey, calm down. Letting him get to you isn't the answer.
Then what is? It's not the first time he's done it, touching my hair and rubbing up against me. At first, I thought I must be making a mistake. This isn't happening. He knows I'm involved with someone. But now I know what's going on and how it makes me feel.
Is that why you called in sick last week?
Believe me, I really did feel sick. I'm so nervous lately. I can't sleep or eat. I do everything to avoid him. But when I pull into the parking lot and I see his car, my stomach just goes into knots. Sometimes I throw up. I used to really like my job, but now I hate it.
Has he propositioned you?
No. But every time he comes near me, there is this sexual charge in the air, and it really spooks me. And now he's talking about this trip to New York next week, and I'm really nervous. What if he tries something there? Every time I think about it, I get so upset I can't work.
Have you said something to him?
I've told him that my personal life is my own business, but he doesn't seem to take a hint. I don't want to seem like a troublemaker. I know how the game is played. If you get along...
You mean play along?
Right. Then everything is all right. But if you say something, then you're passed over for every promotion for the next 5 years.
Tell me about it. A guy at another agency where I worked once cornered me in a conference room. I really freaked.
What did you do?
Quit.
The situation that developed here exemplifies the problem facing many people in today's workplace. His behavior, the comments, the touching, the unwanted sexual overtures made her feel angry and scared. It's possible he's said or done the same things to other women, so he's come to persist in this kind of behavior towards women who work for him. But the real issue here is how Kathleen feels about Larry's actions. There's another element of the situation to consider.
At first, I thought I must be making a mistake. This isn't happening. He knows I'm involved with someone. But now I know what's going on and how it makes me feel.
Sexual harassment is defined from the victim's point of view. In fact, in 1991, a federal court established a reasonable woman standard. This means that the severity of the unwelcome behavior is determined by what a reasonable person in the position of the victim would consider offensive. And given the statistics, this often means what a reasonable woman would consider harassment. Yet Kathleen's shock at Larry's actions made her doubt her perceptions at first. She could have asked herself the following questions to help her decide if she was being sexually harassed. Am I offended by this behavior? How does it make me feel? Is this behavior related to my job? Is the behavior unwanted and unsolicited? Are these advances of a sexual nature? The situation between Kathleen and Larry focuses on power and control that involves unwanted sexual attention. But the work environment enters into the power equation as well. If a man came on to Kathleen at a bar, she could respond positively or reject him. She wouldn't have to worry about bumping into him in the cafeteria at work on Monday morning. But if Larry made a pass at her at the bar, she would feel restricted about rejecting him because of their relationship in the workplace. There can be a very fine line between sexual politics and career survival.
We'll have to make some more revisions on the year-end report before the New York meeting.
That's no problem. I'll have Kathleen come in over the weekend and input the changes.
Hey, why don't you give the girl a break?
Yeah, she works for me.
You really make them toe the line.
Hey, that's what assistants are for. At least this one's good looking. Yeah, besides, ever since her boyfriend walked out on her, I figured she could probably use the overtime. Something tells me she's not getting enough. Overtime, that is. She can make up for it in New York.
I didn't know she was gone.
Yeah, you know, she kept telling me she needed a weekend away. You know, what am I going to do? I figure I'll toss her a couple of perks and, you know, maybe she'll stay around for 6 months before she asks for a promotion. You know, that's what really burns me. You know, you teach them how to read an annual report right side up and they think they ought to be running the department instead of you.
The most frequently occurring reasons that I see for abuse with the victims that I have worked with tend to fall into the category of either someone who really was lacking the social graces, was ignorant of sort of ways of appropriately interacting, therefore saying or doing some things that were offensive, and just not having any clue that that would be offensive to somebody else, just really innocently causing someone else discomfort. The second most common reason that I find is in terms of trying to make oneself feel more powerful by putting someone else down. Sort of not necessarily real severe harassment, but that's the kind of thing where you hear the jokes, the innuendos, the addressing what someone looks like, and it's a way of making a person sort of uncomfortable, embarrassing them, maybe intimidating them some.
Ways exist to stop sexual harassment. Here's a course any target should follow. Tell the harasser the attention is unwanted. Make the statement in writing. Keep a written record of the harassment. Find out if the harasser has harassed others. Confide in a friend or colleague. Report the situation to your supervisor. File a written complaint.
What you have to be able to demonstrate if you're going to pursue a sexual harassment complaint is that things occurred, and primarily you've got to have some proof of them. I mean, and that's really what it comes down to. Are there coworkers who will corroborate your story, who will say, for instance, that your boss pinched you by the water cooler, if you will, or came to the office on a Monday morning and liked to tell dirty jokes in front of female people when it was clear that they were offended by it?
The first step to stopping sexual harassment is to let the aggressor know your feelings, unless you are being physically threatened or feel you are at an emotional breaking point. One way to do this is by using a basic assertiveness training method called the broken record technique. You state your position and keep repeating it without debating or challenging the other person.
Well, I think that focus group meeting went pretty well.
Good, so did I.
You know, you really ought to wear that outfit to every focus group meeting. It was a big hit. And that perfume again? Terrific.
Larry, stop it.
What do you mean?
I don't want you making comments like that about my appearance or my personal life. That's off limits.
Well, lighten up. How was I supposed to know? You never said anything about this before.
I tried to, but you didn't take a hint. So now I'm telling you, I want it to stop. It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Can't you take a compliment?
I want you to stop talking to me this way. Your comments have made me feel uncomfortable. Don't do it again.
Fine. That's the way you want it.
Kathleen did the right thing by acknowledging the problem and letting Larry know how she felt. Surveys indicate that the majority of harassers stop the offensive behavior when they are asked to by their victims. Being assertive does not mean being aggressive or argumentative. It does mean being direct and honest in setting personal boundaries the harasser will understand and respect. That can be accomplished by being direct, confident, and consistent. When confronting a harasser, a target should state his or her position and keep repeating it. Be specific. Be consistent. Be direct and confident. One advantage of the broken record technique is the issue is never debated with the harasser. This is not the time for verbal one-upmanship. Nor should you sound as if the situation is in any way your fault. Another don't. Never analyze the harasser or refer to his or her personal life in any way. Playing psychiatrist isn't appropriate. State your feelings about specific actions that bother you. When confronting a harasser, don't debate, assume any responsibility for the situation, analyze the harasser's problems, refer to the harasser's personal life. Once you have clearly told the harasser that the attention is unwanted, there are other steps you should take as well. In Kathleen's case, she should have made her statement in writing, in addition to expressing her feelings to Larry verbally. Her written statement should be dated. In it, she would describe the situation and her feelings. It's important that Kathleen keep a copy of the memo for her personal files. She should also confide in a friend or colleague about the situation and try to find out if Larry has harassed other people in the workplace. In addition, Kathleen should keep a journal or written record of the incidents, including what happened, where it took place, her response, whether there were any witnesses, who she told, and what she said to that individual. If the harassment doesn't stop, she should report the problem to her supervisor and ask the supervisor to see that it stopped. If the harasser is her supervisor, she should go to his supervisor. If the activity still continues, she should file a complaint using her company's internal grievance procedure.
There is no doubt in my mind that companies need policies in a variety of areas. Now, we can argue about the width and breadth of those areas, but one of those, it seems to me, that's not arguable is a policy on sexual harassment. You clearly need to define the parameters of behavior in that area. The EEOC has provided guidelines that are fairly clear in establishing and writing a policy. There are boilerplate types of policies you can get, and you can modify yours as you need to.
Educational institutions need to be concerned about sexual harassment because the relationship between a teacher or a faculty member and a student is a very personal one. And the student wants certain things from a faculty member in terms of instruction and in terms of grades. And it is tempting sometimes for a faculty member or a teacher to hold that authority and that power over a student. So it's very important for the institution to protect students from misuse of authority and power.
I felt like that where I was at, the steps that weren't taken that maybe if had been taken would have altered the situation is they didn't have a formal policy on harassment, and they didn't have a formal grievance system for harassment. Because like when it happened to me, I had no idea. I had no idea who to go to. You know, instinctively I went to my supervisor, but I had no idea from that point who it would be reported to, who we would speak to. And I think that vagueness of it all, that it wasn't definitive of if you harass someone, you will have to be held accountable for it. Or also, if you were harassed, you didn't know. I mean, it was like the great unknown to take this step and go and say, look, this happened to me and I want to report it. And I think that that is a big critical thing that you have to have in a company, that you have to have a policy, or at least let to where your employees know where you stand with it.
And a corporation that doesn't have that kind of a policy and procedure is laying itself wide open for being held responsible for the actions of its own employees, wrongful actions of its own employees, even if upper management wasn't aware that they were happening. So the person should be able to go to, there should be a policy and they should have a specific procedure which allows them to bypass the person that they're accusing, and if they don't, if the company doesn't have that, they should.
If the harassment hasn't stopped, you can file a charge with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission or file a lawsuit based on your state's law. Laws vary from state to state, so you'll need to check with an attorney about your own situation. New laws and court decisions are constantly changing the aspect of sexual harassment cases. As a result of the 1991 Civil Rights Act on sexual harassment, victims can seek a financial award that includes both compensatory and punitive damages.
With the advent of national publicity and the recognition by people that there are available avenues of relief, more and more cases are being brought to courts. We've seen a dramatic increase in the last 2 or 3 years. With more decisions and more courtroom experiences, the laws are evolving. We're still very much in an evolutionary process. There are no hard and fast rules. I don't know that there ever will be, but certainly we've seen a lot more discussion by courts about what is sexual harassment, what kinds of claims can you bring, what sort of proof do you need, and what kind of remedies and are available to you. So we are seeing a lot more of that.
Federal government employees or workers for a company which has more than 15 workers can file a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This can be done without hiring a lawyer. However, after the EEOC makes a decision regarding the complaint, the victim should consult an attorney. If the victim works for a small company with less than 15 employees, he or she can ask a lawyer to evaluate state laws and give legal advice. It's advised to contact the Legal Aid Society or Community Legal Service Center if the victim can't afford a lawyer. The important thing for targets of sexual harassment to keep in mind is that they are not at fault. Sexual harassment is illegal. Targets should first try to confront the aggressor in a non-threatening manner, then follow steps through the workplace to the courtroom if necessary.
Let the person know that you don't appreciate it, and you let them know gently at first, and then use progressive steps. If you get to the point where you've made it absolutely clear verbally that you're not interested in this and that you don't appreciate it, the next thing to do is to put it in writing, document it, and bring it to the attention either of that person's supervisor or preferably go through corporate policy channels if there is in fact a policy in place. Oftentimes that will mean going to someone in the personnel department or the human resources department and making sure that it's known.
Ways exist to stop sexual harassment. Tell the harasser the attention is unwanted. Make the statement in writing. Keep a written record of the harassment. Find out if the harasser has harassed others. Confide in a friend or colleague. Report the situation to your supervisor. File a written complaint. Bringing the issue of sexual harassment into our public consciousness is a start, but we still have a long way to go as a society before we put an end to this demeaning and discriminatory behavior. Change begins with education. We must sensitize people to the kinds of behavior that others find personally offensive, including sexual innuendos and practical jokes, and eliminate it from the workplace and from our schools.
I mean, it's just been since the early 80s where it's even been illegal to harass somebody. There hasn't even been a precedent for it until then. So we're only talking something that's been around for about 12 years. So that the public is becoming much more educated, much more aware of the issues.
We are seeing a change in attitudes by the males in the workplace environment. All of a sudden, the rules have been changed on them in many respects. They no longer feel comfortable and confident in the way they're dealing with their female subordinates and female coworkers. There's almost been a reactive mode where we have gone from a lot of off-color jokes and playfulness to a situation where people have much less personal relationships with their employees because of fear of things like this. I think the key is going to be getting to a point where we all respect the boundaries and think about what we are saying, who we are saying it to, and what kind of reception we're getting.
Most importantly, we must learn to respect the rights of others. With this respect and a heightened awareness, we can prevent certain attitudes and behaviors from culminating in the situations that confronted Kathleen and others. We have the laws. What we now need is the equality of treatment these laws provide for, and a greater sensitivity. So no really does mean no.
Don't do it again.